What have the devs got to say about matchmaking and the rank system in Paladins, you may very well ask. And they just had a live Q&A with the community trying to answer just that question. Unfortunately, I would say on a whole, not a lot was said, to be quite frank. But I'm just going to quickly try and run down what has been said and some of my thoughts and feelings and whether or not they might have covered some of my grievances with the system. Very briefly, as I have covered it in other videos, the MMR, the matchmaking rating, and the matchmaking system in general works off of their own proprietary system that's based off true skill and is basically something that's developed on from the ELO system. You're matching up players looking at their skill rating that's worked out in game by how much they win and lose, and lots of other factors in the game. One of the factors that I didn't think was a thing or didn't know about, or I mean they didn't 100% specify exactly how it worked, but that champions themselves, it can affect your end rating. So your champions don't affect your matchmaking to begin with, so who you're matched against, but if you take a Androxus for example, and you play that Androxus a lot, so if you're say Perdo or Prince Danny or Stolzy, and you are a great Androxus and you win 80% of your games. They probably don't, but let's give that figure. And you're playing in the rank system. At the end of the game, when it looks at how many points to give you, it will look at your matchup based on all of your player ratings in your team, and then also your champion ratings versus the enemy's player ratings and champion ratings, and work out the fair points between those two. So if the enemy team are all playing bad champions and you're playing your best champions and you won, then you're only going to get a few points. But if you lose, you're going to lose a lot because the enemy team are playing their crappy champions and also have lower skill rating. That was the only thing that they really touched on with the matchmaking and how it worked in detail, apart from what we already knew about the true skill system and generally what we could pick up from how Smite worked. Personally, I'm of the opinion that the champion doesn't really matter who you pick in the game, and they also talked about decoupling the champion and the profile ratings so that they wouldn't interact with each other. And personally, I'm quite for that, because at the end of the day, you have a great player. If they play any sort of champion, or they play a champion to fit a role, then they're probably going to play better than you are. And honestly, a lot of the time, team composition matters a lot more than your best champion that you can play. Obviously, I think that scales up from the lower skill brackets, where your individual skill in the champion will probably mean more, to the sort of higher level play, and then team compositions might mean a lot more. But just because a pro player is going to pick up a Ying when they normally play an Androxus, it doesn't mean they're going to be terrible on that Ying. One thing that a lot of people get annoyed about is the MMR or matchmaking ratings of each team and how they sort of compare. And one of the things that is getting on people's nerves is when they look at the third-party sites and see there's matchmaking ratings that have been estimated, and they look and they don't match up. Now, the Paladins devs maybe a little too scathingly said that the third-party matchmaking sites weren't accurate. I say that in the way that I really like the third-party matchmaking sites, and they did say that too, but at the same time they said it in a way that they were annoyed about the third-party matchmaking sites and how players react to them and react to the matches. Now, that wouldn't be a problem if Hi-Rez and these third-party sites were able to come to an agreement and they could share the matchmaking system and they could be accurate on their websites. I mean, that would be a step in the right direction, as the sites don't know the full calculations or have access to the in-house API. Unfortunately, nothing was said about that. They just said about the matchmaking sites being inaccurate, but in my opinion, share your API with them. However, they did say, and they didn't say we're doing this, they said that they are looking at the idea of having people's matchmaking rating, so on each team, visible after the match, so you can see basically what sort of ratings there are on both teams. So you're not just guessing and saying, oh no, we just got rolled because they were so much better, they had such a high rating, matchmaking sucks. But obviously that's another feature that they're saying, and that's what they said was potentially coming. This should be a definitely coming. Like, the biggest problem at the moment is people complaining about the matchmaking but not having anything accurate to go off. And it's interesting that the ELO points are tied to the champions, as that's also another source of frustration. Another thing that could come is casual MMR visible on your profile as well as your competitive MMR. So if you didn't know, both your casual games and your ranked games are match made, and they said each game mode uses the same system. They're separate from each other. Like the ranked elo is different from your casual elo. It would make sense because otherwise your points in competitive would be different, and they change whilst you play casual, so they must be separate. On the whole, at the moment, there's a bit of a over-the-top matchmaking rating gained and lost of champions. The thing is, they say it's because of this underdog factor in the game. The only thing is, your profile rating doesn't change as much as your champion ratings do, which I've always said is that to begin with, your champion ratings will be on the wonky scale where you're getting trying to calibrate your elo on those champions, so there will be more wild and losses and gains. But now, how much does that champion underdog factor come into play? I'm not entirely sure, but that's sort of what they're insinuating. They're insinuating that if they change the underdog factor, the points may become more consistent. And I think really importantly needed is some more consistency with the points to make people stop raging so much, and it should just be based on a player's skill rather than a champion skill. Another thing that they mentioned is that they're leaning towards a hard reset, so you go back to 0 on your matchmaking rating, but likely if they do decouple the champion and the player ratings, then it could come then. The other important things that I think a lot of people ask for is a actual account-wide rating, or sort of like border for yourself that's separate from the champion ratings, and they said that there's incentives to do that, and sort of they were leaning towards something, but nothing was really inferred. In my opinion, this is one of the more important things that needs to be added into the game. There needs to be more importance put onto your actual player matchmaking rating rather than just your champions. It could be cool to take the actual borders from the champions, put that onto your profile, then go back to the champions and give them something that goes on top of your avatar, something like a star or something like some sort of army insignia to show your champions rating on top of your profile rating. But in my opinion, your profile rating should be the most important thing, and they should make more of a big deal about the tier of matchmaking you get into. So if you're like the top, if you're the Grandmasters above 5,500, the Masters under 5,000, 4,500, you got the Diamonds, and make it a really big deal about that. That really incentivizes people to want to get into those tiers and make them important and make just your general matchmaking more of a thing. And like I've said before, and I keep repeating whenever I talk about the rank system, I actually don't like the champion ratings at all, to be honest, because what it does, it makes people play one champion even against the composition of the team that you've already picked. It also makes people not want to pick them if they don't think they're going to win or they're not getting along with their teammates, and pick something that isn't in the meta, and obviously decoupling the ratings. But just having the champion rating there in the first place sort of encourages the bad behavior. And also, even though they're saying the decoupling the ratings might help, but the big losses and the big gains are probably partly to do with how many matches you played. It's just a very frustrating thing to have in there just because you don't play very many matches with those champions anyway. I've always said that perhaps the champion stuff should be, the borders should be on your mastery ratings, and maybe make them harder to get rather than being competitive at all, and then having the competitive being just your profile and showing off your skill bracket. Anyway, that was kind of the matchmaking. There wasn't a lot said, so I don't have a lot to cover, and I was a bit disappointed, to be quite honest. Like, what they said didn't really address all of the issues that have been brought up and some of the things that we'd want sooner to keep the rank system alive, and to get some of the higher level players back into it and the people that have been staying away from it at the moment. One good thing is that we've got a back-to-back champion reveal, and that is likely Ceres and this fairy character. And anyway, what does everyone else think about the matchmaking and what's been said? If you want to watch the full dev Q&A, then I'll link it in the description, but honestly I don't think they said a lot, and the structure of their Q&A was a bit odd. Like, Rainday would ask some questions, they wouldn't answer it, but not wanting to answer it, but almost as if it was out of order. So they didn't answer at that time, but that led to some confusing answers and things not being completely explained. It was a bit frustrating to watch live, to be honest. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Give a like if you enjoyed it, subscribe for more of my content, and I'll see you all next time. Joshino.